Tonight, Israel begins a new stage of the war, expanding the ground operation with a renewed pledge to destroy Hamas. Attacks from the sky, the sea, and inside Gaza.
Strong and precise, and hunt down every terrorist.
As terrified residents huddle in the dark without cell service and internet. Maine in grief and grappling with tragedy.
We can now begin to pick up the pieces.
Also revealed new details about the suspected shooter.
If you talk about, is there a motive here, right?
Plus, demanding action after death in Sault Ste. Marie.
We're just not taking it anymore.
The move to label intimate partner violence a crisis.
This shouldn't have happened. 3 children were killed here. That's horrifying.
CTV National News with Sandy Ronaldo.
Good evening. We begin with stunning news out of Hollywood. Actor Matthew Perry, one of the stars of the iconic comedy show Friends, has died. Matthew Perry was apparently found at his home. Multiple sources say he appears to have drowned, something NBC News says was confirmed by a representative for the actor and a police source.
I've got something important to tell you. Guys? Guys? I'm gonna ask Monica to marry me.
Perry played Chandler Bing on the popular show for 10 seasons. He struggled with drug addiction and health issues and recently wrote a book about it. Sources say first responders arrived at the home following a call about a cardiac arrest. Perry was apparently found in a jacuzzi. Sources say there were no drugs at the scene and no foul play involved. Matthew Perry grew up in Ottawa. His mother, Suzanne, was a member of Pierre Elliott Trudeau's communications staff when he was Prime Minister. Perry's stepfather, Keith Morrison, once anchored this newscast. Matthew Perry was 54. Now to the war between Israel and Hamas. Israel today pounded Gaza, stepping up the assault and unleashing a bombardment that residents of the beleaguered territory call the most intense of the war. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the conflict will be long and difficult until there is victory over Hamas after the most vicious massacre since the Holocaust. The IDF escalated its military campaign inside Gaza, tanks moving deeper, targeting Hamas's extensive system of underground tunnels, while urging Palestinians inside the territory to move south away from the combat zone. CTV's Jeremy Sharon begins our coverage.
Launching fire from land, sea, and air, Israel's military expanding its ground operation, entering what it calls the second stage of this war. The war in Gaza will be long and difficult, says Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. We will fight and we will win. Israeli forces have increased bombardments, targeting Hamas tunnels and combat spaces. Communication in Gaza has been wiped out, creating a total or near blackout of information. People can't call each other and tell each other what's going on, says this Palestinian living in the occupied West Bank. Even emergency responders don't know where the dead people are, he says. This as Israeli Defense Forces issued a new and urgent message.
We urge all residents of northern Gaza and Gaza City to relocate south immediately.
Warning of its focus to neutralize the threat of Hamas.
We're determined to finish Hamas off. That is our task, that is our goal.
The ramping up of operations comes as Israel's ambassador to Canada is accusing Hamas of using hospitals as command centers.
Hiding behind the weakest in the Palestinian society, behind sick people, underneath the ground of the hospital is one of the worst war crimes that Hamas is actually perpetrating at the moment.
Hamas has denied the allegations. More than 1,400 Israelis have been killed since the October 7th attack. Health officials in Gaza say the Palestinian death toll has now surpassed 7,700.
I think the Israelis are going to be very deliberate and careful about how they get after this on a slice by slice basis. And they're doing that to try and prevent casualties from their own forces.
Now, as Gaza remains in the dark tonight, Elon Musk is offering up his SpaceX Starlink satellite to support communication for aid organizations in Gaza. Sandy?
Jeremy, thank you. Rallies were held across Israel during the day and evening. Family members of the 229 confirmed hostages demanding action.
Bring them home! No! Bring them home! No! Bring them home!
They are angry, frustrated, and frightened.
I can't wait anymore. I need my son back home. And we need answers now. Not today, now. I'm telling you, we can't wait anymore.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with some of the families and promised to do everything possible to save the hostages. Joining us now from Sderot, the scene of the October 7th slaughter by Hamas, is CNN's Nick Robertson. Nick, the IDF says it conducted massive strikes on Hamas tunnels and bunkers. Now we can hear some of the action behind you. How can Israel be sure the hostages were not harmed?
I don't think they can be sure. The Prime Minister says it's a priority not only to defeat Hamas, but bring the hostages out as well. The Defense Minister says the current increase in conflict should put pressure on Hamas to release the hostages. Hamas says that they are willing to negotiate over a hostage release for Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails. So both sides have a vested interest, it would seem, in the survival of hostages. But with the airstrikes, it's very hard for Israel to actually know where, or impossible even, to know where all the hostages, and they now say there are 230 of them, to know where they all are. So therefore it would be impossible to know that they would all be safe with some of these very intense strikes that we're seeing.
So that being the case, Nick, as the ground invasion enters a new phase, what's the reaction within Israel to the escalation?
Where we are close to Gaza, the communities here really feel threatened by Hamas. They feel incredibly afraid that if something isn't done about Hamas, that they could be in danger again. This town was one of those overrun. Many others were. So there's a real sense in communities here that there needs to be a security response to take out Hamas. That's priority, and I think that is writ large, not, of course, to everyone across the country who really wish their politicians had found another way to deal with Hamas and think that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's policies have been wrong and a part of the reason that the country is in this situation. But in this region in particular, there is strong support for military action against Hamas, and really a lot of very popular and strong support for the military who are going through all these very dangerous operations.
All right, CNN's Nick Robertson, thank you for this. There were some large-scale demonstrations again today around the world against Israel's actions. In London, thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters demanded an end to the bombings. Palestinians on the streets of Hebron in the West Bank called for a boycott of Israeli products. And this was a scene in Toronto, an anti-Israel protest with similar protests in other cities like this one in Winnipeg. Well, after days on edge, the city of Lewiston, Maine has moved from fear to grief in the aftermath of a shooting rampage.
Because we remember all those that are hurting tonight.
Tonight, a candlelight vigil in memory of the 18 victims gunned down in cold blood. They ranged in age from 14 to 76. Police have also released new details about the killer. Here's CTV's Genevieve Beauchemin.
The heart of Lewiston is broken, but the end of the manhunt for the mass murderer has brought a measure of relief to the city in Maine.
It's amazing how hard everybody worked to find him and how it's bringing some people together.
The sprawling search for Army reservist Robert Card ended at a recycling plant where he once worked, a 15-minute drive from the shootings at the bowling alley and at the bar. Police had cleared this area twice over the two-day search, but a tactical team returned last night and found the body in an unlocked box trailer. Card died of a self-inflicted gunshot. 2 firearms were found.
There's been a number of firearms that have been recovered as part of this investigation, and some of them have been purchased very recently, and some of them years and years ago.
For the families of the 18 victims, news of the killer's death brought mixed emotions. Josh Seal was a devoted father, advocate for the deaf community. He had known his wife Elizabeth since preschool. She hoped Card would have some sort of explanation.
I wanted him to be found, apprehended. I wanted to ask questions that will not be answered. Why did you do this? What was the motive? Why would you hurt so many families?
Investigators are still working to try to provide some answers. They say a note was found at the gunman's home. It only provided details for a loved one about accessing his bank accounts and phone. But officials are piecing together his mental health history.
When you're talking about paranoia, you're talking about individuals in crisis.
That has raised some questions about Card's access to weapons, about gun control. But in Lewiston, the end of the manhunt marks the beginning of a new phase of grieving.
Certainly our hearts are broken, and we're grieving alongside the victims and their families. Lewiston is a strong community, we are a resilient community, and I have no doubt that we'll be okay.
And for many, this vigil is part of the process after days of sheltering in place, finally being together to mourn. Sandy.
Genevieve, thank you. The shooting deaths this week of a mother and 3 children in Northern Ontario are fueling more calls for help for victims and survivors of domestic abuse. CTV's Tony Grace now on a growing push to declare intimate partner violence an epidemic.
In the biggest cities and the smallest towns, the impact of domestic violence is hitting close to home.
When I heard about that happening up north, my heart sank. It just was like one more, here we go, you know.
Survivor and advocate Shannon Murray describing how she felt when she heard about the shooting deaths of a mother and 3 children in Sault Ste. Marie, which brought hundreds together for a vigil.
It's really, it's ripped through the community. This shouldn't have happened to Angie Sweeney. Angie Sweeney should be living today.
And also underscored the scope of the tragedy when Sweeney's father spoke about his daughter and also stood with the gunman's mother, noting she lost grandchildren as well. The cycle of grief has more than 60 communities in Ontario declaring intimate partner violence an epidemic. On Monday, Sault Ste. Marie City Councillor Angela Caputo will ask her colleagues to do the same.
I am definitely a firm advocate, and I'm not taking no for an answer this time.
The goal is to push the provincial government into a formal declaration.
To finally say, we see you, and we care about you, and we want this to stop happening.
A declaration that was also recommended by the jury at an inquest into the triple homicide of 3 women in the Ottawa Valley. It's a call the province has so far rejected.
I feel like it's long overdue.
Advocates say scenes like this only push them to get louder as they hear more reports of overwhelmed shelters and agencies.
How can you turn somebody away to go back if they're a victim of domestic violence?
Councillor Caputo describes that upcoming vote on declaring an epidemic symbolic and important, but says something else recommended by that inquest, a registry for repeat offenders of intimate partner violence, could also save lives. Sandy.
Tony, thank you. Pilots with Air Canada are warning of a turbulent future after the carrier canceled direct routes out of Calgary. Their complaints aren't just about destinations, but also wages, with no collective bargaining agreement in sight. CTV's Tyler Barrow reports.
Pilots at the bargaining table want to see career progression, job security, aviation safety, and the wage gap between them and American pilots shrink.
They ratified a deal, and that deal has them making twice as much, if not more, than the pilots I represent at Air Canada.
The informational picket comes as pilot concern grows for Air Canada flight reduction at YYC Airport.
We find that concerning for ourselves as pilots. We find it concerning for Canadians.
Impacting the industry is a shortage of regional pilots. According to the president of Air Passenger Rights, the pilot's message is really about looking after the next generation.
Spend many tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, before you are at a point that you can earn significant money from your skill.
John Graddick, head of McGill University Aviation Management Program, says the recent cancellations show the airline's market priority.
Calgary is not on the high order pecking list of where Air Canada sees its markets going over the next 12 to 18 months.
In response to the informational picket, Air Canada says the changes to its flying schedule are intended to improve overall operational stability of the carrier, and the company remains committed to the Calgary and Western markets. Tyler Barrow, CTV News, Calgary.
Well, it's been 5 years since Canada became the first G20 country to legalize the sale of cannabis. Now, a new survey finds that most Canadians support the move. 64% of those asked are in favor of Ottawa's transition to legal weed, while 31% disagree. But what about the industry itself? Once touted as a can't-miss investment growth opportunity, there are fears the pot business may be burning out. CTV's Colton Prale explains.
It's customer service that's keeping small cannabis stores like this alive.
Are you looking for craft product or are you looking for a little more price friendly?
5 years after marijuana was legalized, the ganja gold rush has yet to materialize.
Margins are super thin because we buy from the same supplier, and there's bigger corporations and companies that have the time to lose money, We don't.
Data from the federal government shows 15% of businesses licensed under the Cannabis Act had left the market by April, while larger companies have made major layoffs, like Sundial, who closed their flagship production factory in Olds, Alberta last week.
Well, we're going to have to see some exit, and we're going to have to see a reduction in total production capacity to stabilize prices and to stabilize inventories.
One of the biggest challenges in the industry is overproduction. In 2022, there was nearly 1.5 billion grams of unsold dry cannabis. The year prior, producers destroyed more than a quarter of all product grown in the country.
And when you had a glut like that, prices continued to drop, and it was sort of a vicious circle. The more prices went down, the more people sort of had to grow to meet up with that demand.
Retailers say limitations on THC content and restrictions around edibles are some of the biggest challenges keeping them from expanding their customer base.
Edibles definitely need to go up. Customers that have a bigger tolerance shouldn't have to be buying 10 packages at $10 a piece.
Some consumers are turning to their own supply to keep costs low.
It's cheaper than the other market. So people that wanted to get out of there, it could be down to pennies to $1 a gram.
Ottawa is currently reviewing the Cannabis Act, looking for ways to better streamline the industry. It's something experts say is desperately needed. That report is expected back spring of 2024. Sandy.
Thank you, Colton. Still ahead, scoring Canada's stamp of approval. Honors for a hockey hero. Today we learned an Iranian teenager who fell into a coma after sustaining head injuries has died. Video shows 16-year-old Armita Garavan being pulled out of a train car at a Tehran subway station. Activists say morality police assaulted her for not wearing a head covering. Ukraine's armed forces say thousands of Russian soldiers are dead following a bloody offensive around Avdiivka near the Donetsk region. A Russian attack left the town in ruins. According to the White House, Russia is executing its own soldiers as they retreat from the fierce fighting. And some good news today. Honors for Willie O'Ree, the Fredericton-born hockey legend who broke the color barrier in 1958.
1, 2, 3, let's go.
Canada Post unveiled a new stamp with the face of the first black man to play in the NHL. The 88-year-old O'Ree inspired generations. Still ahead, the marvelous colors of Cape Breton, capturing the beauty before the leaves fall. You've heard of storm chasers, people who follow tornadoes and hurricanes. Well, in the Maritimes, there are those who chase the changing seasons. CTV's Sarah Plowman explains.
The pride of the season is on full display. Chasing the change is how Josh Lonis draws inspiration. Reds wrapped in green, golds that glow, oranges that punctuate a canopy of color.
Like the trees here are just super yellow. I've never seen them so bright.
With a kaleidoscope to capture, the cinematographer isn't merely motivated by beauty, but time.
Just the urgency, knowing that it doesn't last very long.
It doesn't matter that he summited mountains in Cape Breton last fall. To appreciate all of autumn's angles, he did it again.
Every sunset, varies, and no sunset is the same, nor every season is the same.
Across the region, drones are up over cranberry fields or treetops.
It is really, really beautiful, especially with the lights of the sun.
Despite the beauty, some people wonder whether the trees are more dull this year, or if the leaves have hung on a little longer.
That's perfect sugar maple.
We asked this tree biologist if this fall is any different.
In some parts of Canada, it definitely is. Because of the huge fires we've had.
He notes droughts could lead trees to lose leaves earlier, and warm autumns delay that process.
Here in New Brunswick, we had a bit of drought early on, but it became one of the wettest summers we've had in a long time. So, I mean, the colors are actually pretty good this year here. A bit late, but very good.
Giving those chasing fall colors the gift of time.
I was just up in Cape Breton about 2 days ago, and my goodness, like the colors are still popping.
And brightness to match it. Sarah Plowman, CTV News, Fredericton.
After the break, the currency of kindness. Seniors delighted with a mystery delivery. We leave you tonight with the story of 18 seniors who all received the same gift. It was slipped under their doors by an anonymous donor. Why is still a mystery. Here's CTV's Adam Sawatsky.
Joni Park says her day couldn't have been more ordinary until it suddenly turned extraordinary.
When I opened the door, there it was, $50.
A crisp $50 bill that had been slipped under her door.
It was quite strange, mysterious.
Because there was absolutely no reason, Joni says, for anybody to give her any money at all. So she started asking around.
That was even stranger.
Turns out her neighbor, Veda Mata, had $50 deposited under her doorstep as well.
Oh, it was delight. A miracle.
It was the sort of reaction that had apparently been reverberating all around the hallways of this low-cost housing building.
I learned later, everybody got a $50 bill.
That's 18 seniors on a fixed income, Joni says. A total of $900.
Who does that? I mean, I might do it, but I don't.
Did you?
No.
Nobody's taking responsibility, leaving everybody wondering who in the building did do it.
Because you can't get in without knowing somebody and pushing the buzzer.
And although there are security cameras everywhere, I'm told they're reserved for catching criminals red-handed, rather than revealing benefactors with red bills in hand.
It's a peculiar set of circumstances we've got here.
While the who and why remain unanswered, there's no question Joni and Veda are filled with gratitude.
It was a very, very kind and generous thing to do.
A mystery 50 turned priceless gift they plan to pay forward.
This will be remembered. This is special.
Adam Sawatsky, CTV News, Victoria.
Sure is special. That's our newscast for this Saturday. Thank you for sharing your time with us. I'm Sandy Ronaldo. Good night until tomorrow.